So anyhow, it's all yours. Have a great show.
Great. Yes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Again, DeepRoots taking a deep dive into best practices for brand expansion. And this week we got a great show because we have the company that has expanded into more markets than any other cannabis company in the US as far as we know. So I'll welcome in Rich Yost, CEO and founder of Airo Brands. Rich, come on in. How you doing, bud?
Hey, Derek, how are you?
Excellent. Excellent. So let's jump in, Rich. You have done an awful lot. You have a ton of experience, but I think there's probably some folks that don't know you as well as others. So give us a little background on, give us the elevator pitch on Airo Brands and where you are and what you're doing. So start there.
Yeah. So just little background. I've started in the industry in 2012. Started off as an angel investor, mostly in Colorado and Washington in the medical days. Very quickly kind of saw just a deep interest in evolving where the products were. I think early days, there was there was really no lab testing mandated. Packaging was kind of nascent. In terms of dosage was nascent. So we decided that, it would be best to put together something and go for a license in New York. We won one of the original 5, and pretty quickly, I think we learned that, being vertical is, takes a lot of capital, but also time and energy. And, our focus really always was, and I say ours, but, my partners and I, the focus always was around products and brands. And having a medical license, the idea was we wanted to build a successful over-the-counter drug business, and we thought New York would be the place to do that without having to go down the FDA rabbit hole, in the sense that it was really the most tightly regulated medical market in the country. I think from a business standpoint, an entrepreneurial standpoint, it was really set up to be kind of a long walk to the bank. And so we decided about a year in to sell the business and just kind of look at it a little differently in terms of how do you build a brand, how do you build products and product innovation, but then also scale that brand in the balkanized distribution system that we have here in the US. And so that was the beginning of that kind of combined with my experience in Washington, where you had to be a state resident, and so you had to kind of think creatively around how to extract value out of the license or the investment in order to participate as a New York resident in a Washington operation. And so as a result, we ultimately came up with the model, which is now Airo. And then on the other side of that coin, it was really just having the ability to focus and lean in on the product development capability. I think Airo, just as a whole, kind of transitioning to what we are today and kind of what our approach is, our core focus has been vape. We've been very successful. We're top 4 brand here in the US, probably the only one that doesn't own infrastructure. We are, as you mentioned, spanning across multiple markets, 25 in total. But we've done that really by bringing not just value to our partners in each state, but bringing value to the end user and bringing some level of differentiation to the vape category. And so as a result, we've been able to successfully scale from one state to another state in what we would consider an asset light model. And I think part of it was capital driven, right? These are very capital inefficient in terms of having to go and build another grow in a state that might already have 100, 200, build another lab in the same state that already has another 100, 200. But then the idea of being able, it's really time, right? How much time does it take you to not just get in and have the money, but actually go out and build one? And so the idea was, okay, well, how can we bring value to partners where we can kind of piggyback and maximize the capacity that they have in their facility to then bring our products to market? And so our focus again has been vape, but more recently, given the depth and breadth and distribution, we felt that we could also bring some innovation to other categories. We've just launched edibles in about 4 markets. That's going to continue to expand, and then we have some other products and categories in the pipeline.
So you're in 24 markets today, and you have plans to be in. I mean, you're not stopping. What does the roadmap look like over the next 3, 6, 9 months?
I think one of the big ones to keep an eye on for us is Minnesota. That's converting to adult use here in should be in January. Beyond that, there's a handful of other states that we're in conversations with. So, states like Montana, There was a couple other markets, but I think right now most of our focus is, how do we continue to scale in the existing states? So when we look at our business, there's 3 areas that drive growth, right? 1 is take your existing states and drive velocity. 2 is add new states and territories, and 3 and then is add new products and new SKUs into different categories. And so in terms of new states, I think we have our plate full here with about 25 that we feel really strongly about. Connecticut's coming online in a couple of months. That'll be our 25th market. And then beyond that, we have some stuff happening internationally. We're working with a group called Somai there. They're based out of Portugal. They're going to be our producer, and we're going after a couple of markets there, such as Australia, UK, and then Germany. And so we're just kind of working through that process as well.
So obviously you sold your assets in New York, you got some money for that, and you kind of took a step back and said, what do I want to do now? You had a vision for the business model, yet most of your experience was doing vertically integrated. So you talk, you've got a background in investment, right? So you understand ROI and capital efficiency and all that. When you were sitting there, was it, when you had a vision, like, okay, did you determine there's no way I want to do vertically integrated, like that makes no sense? Or was it more the driver and the vision of the IP licensing model that you felt was more, whether it's capital efficient or just long-term success? I mean, it was quite a bet to not bet on owning any infrastructure at that point in time. You were, I think, you and maybe like a Binsker, like just a few others that went to the asset light model. You were contrarian out of the gate, right? What went into all that? That was a big decision that's proven to be a good one.
I thank you. I think it was focus. It was hard for us to even talk about new products and the product development cycle and what we want to do and get the whole company when we have people in every department, from retail to cultivation to manufacturing to product transformation, and then ultimately sales and distribution. It's hard to not, in my mind, it was just kind of hard to be an expert at all things, right? And we felt that on the cultivation side, yes, there's a craft market and certainly a lot of talent in that side of the industry, but more or less, what we need to make, I think, a core group of SKUs, a lot of this biomass ends up being readily available. And so being vertically integrated is great if you're super early in a market and have a very close-knit network of dispensaries and competing assets against you. But once it opens up, as everybody knows, price compression starts to set in, and products available, right? And the reality is, for us, I think we just wanted to focus our time and our energy on where we thought value creation would happen, which was on the product development cycle.
Yeah, and so the product, incidentally, which is very cool, right? Got this kind of a nice magnetic kind of nice and haptic kind of response. Why did you go vape, right? I mean, you could have gone into gummies, you could have gone into you could have done anything. What was the driver behind Airo Brands and the selection of the vape category as the place to lean in?
I think if you think about all the categories, vape has the most room for innovation, right? Because it's part software cannabis, as we call it software here, but then it's also part hardware. And we think that vape is a fantastic delivery system. We think inhalation is in terms of uptake and delivery, it's great, and we think vape is a very healthy alternative. And so when you kind of couple like where the market was at the time, so a lot of people were migrating e-cigarette technology over to cannabis, and it just wasn't working, right? There's a true viscosity profile that's very different in cannabis than in nicotine. And then at the same time, I think everybody was using 510 threads, and we felt that in order to really optimize the experience, what we learned was you had to have a cartridge and a device that worked in sync. So even though these things look interchangeable, these 510 screw-on cartridge, everybody's using a different OEM battery from China, and there's different performance outputs on that product. And so we felt there was a lot of room to bring something that was way ahead of the market in terms of a full symbiotic system, right? And so that's what we did. And then over time, we learned it wasn't just the cartridge and the hardware and how those two interact, but very quickly, in about 6 months into our launch, we learned that It's really the whole, the whole trinity here in terms of device, cartridge, and then also oil and oil viscosity and formulation. And so, just in that aspect, we were able to really focus and kind of hone in on all three components and how they interact with each other. And I think we've been able to do a great job of breaking out in terms of the performance of the product itself.
Yeah, let's stay on this because just for a second, I mean, the differentiation of this form factor, I mean, it's quite different from others in the market. Did you scour the market in China looking for innovation, or did you drive some of the innovation that you were looking for and work with manufacturers to kind of get it right in terms of what your experience, what you wanted to be in? Because obviously it's 2024, you've been doing this for 10 years, so maybe in the beginning it was, you learned as you go and said, I don't like this form factor, I don't like this hardware, I don't like this software. And talk about the evolution of the product as it relates to kind of incrementally adding innovation to it over time.
Yeah, so we worked very closely with an engineering firm here in the US called Jupiter to develop the product. It was something that they showed, the form factor itself, that was something they showed us. And, we worked closely with them to kind of tweak and continue to tailor the product before launch. And, they have a close manufacturing relationship with a group out of China, which is called C-Cell. And we have we at Airo, some of our former folks here that were in the e-cigarette space before they were at Airo, also had the same relationship overseas with S'more. And so we've been able to just work closely through our US counterpart in Jupiter to then bring that product to market. And then once we brought it to market and got ourselves a kind of a good handle in terms of where the rubber meets the road in terms of oil and oil quality and viscosity and color and all that, then we started to really tweak and tailor. And so even the device that you're holding in your hand, you could see there's a rose ring. It was something we introduced about a year ago, which was a specific cartridge for live rosin. I think our point of view was, there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of control that I think people are trying to give the consumer, but our thought is it should be a very intuitive experience for the end user. And so there is no button, there is no control. We as a company should be doing that for you and taking the different oils that we're putting in and optimizing those for your satisfaction.
Yeah, nice. So let's talk real quick, because we're going to dive into kind of some of the experiences you've had, which I think will be educational for listeners. But let's talk real quick about, so you were an investor, you had a very nice exit, and then you're sitting around, you said, okay, it's an IP licensing model, this is where I want to go. Did you ever have any concerns that, raising money with an IP licensing strategy where you're really taking somewhere between 10 and 20% of the economics, that regardless of how big you would get, you would only be receiving a small percentage of the actual overall revenue? So instead of booking 100% or 50% of the revenue, you're booking, 10, 15, 20, and you have obviously marketing and sales expenses against that. Were you ever concerned that it would be harder to raise capital, or that investors wouldn't be comfortable with a company that probably looks very profitable on relatively more, like in terms of what we see in the market, a smaller revenue base?
Yeah, listen, it was a hard, we went out, I mean, most of our, from a capital standpoint, I mean, most of it's been, there's a lot of self-conviction here. And so, we've taken a lot of the risk ourselves and myself personally. And so when we went out to raise capital, I think this was 2018, early 2019, it was a hard story to tell, right? People just didn't understand, especially coming out of, at the time, licenses seemed so valuable and seemed a lot safer in terms of an asset that you'd want to put your money behind, right? Because there was people watching in certain states, there was real exit value to having a license, a vertically integrated license. I think the difference is, our reach in terms of how fast and how quick we can ramp, what our profitability looks like. I think all that was really, at the end of the day, was really for us the driving factor, right? We were already in 2016, we already went to the movie where we spent too much money. And just from that experience was, okay, let's just bring some practicality to the process here. I know there's a lot of capital at that time, a lot of capital was floating around, but let's be smart and methodical and build this kind of brick by brick. And, we've been able to do that. So Airo's been, a profitable company since, I think year two. And that the importance of that was being able to kind of focus on us and make our own decisions and not have a lot of outside pressure on the company.
Yeah, no, and so fast forward to today, obviously in hindsight, bumps and bruises along the way, but fantastic decision. Your 24 markets, again, not to dive into the revenue side, but very profitable and very focused. And I guess I'd say you're very well positioned for whatever eventuality we have on a regulatory basis from the feds. But you could certainly centralize production and ship all over the US someday, or you're also clean because you're non-plant touching, right? What are the other benefits of this model that you've kind of seen play out over the last couple of years, and to the point of where you are today, right? What would you highlight in terms of what's right?
I think it's kind of on one hand, it's the same token, right? So not having a license in certain cases is a true pro, and in some cases it's you end up wanting to move a product to market and it takes a little bit longer, right? Because you're not in control of the license. But I think net the agility of being able to move around and kind of get a lay of the land and having some nimbleness on a state-by-state basis, I think really allows you to kind of keep up with the times. Even now, it just doesn't stop in terms of the evolution of the category itself and kind of where oil is going, where the market price is going, how price compression sets in, and so it's given us a real tool in order to be able to deal with that pretty rapidly across multiple states.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because your experience, I mean, you've watched, nearly every state kind of mature in a similar fashion, right? With the, in the beginning, not a lot of flower, then oversupply, then kind of normalize. So you're watching markets kind of react in similar ways, not 100%. I mean, outdoor grow, indoor grow, there's obviously nuances and differences. But in terms of your strategic plan and like long-term sustainability, it would seem that this cycle of each state and how it evolves. You've been through it so many times, you know what to expect. You're not tripping on, oh my God, prices are so high, thinking that they're going to stay there, and you're trying to get a 1 gram vape out the door for $85 day in, day out, and otherwise. But have you kind of is your model kind of really followed become sustainable through the kind of conforming to how these markets roll out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been able to get ahead of a lot of the price compression discussion, specifically with the partner. And I think some of that is now what partners kind of tend to rely on us on is we've been to the movie before. And so I know that everybody goes through that process where we're asking them maybe to take a leap of faith and believe us, but of course we have the data to support it, and we can show them real life examples of kind of where this ends up going. Now every state's different. The East Coast is as much as there's going to be price compression, you're seeing it very aggressively happen in Massachusetts. There's still a lot of states that are just getting their feet under it in terms of number of licenses, so that process will have a lag in it. But I think in terms of our go-to-market, we have a pretty standard go-to-market that I think is the right approach, no matter kind of where we are, right? We just built the toolbox the right way to deal with each state, and then it really comes down to kind of pricing. And I know you and I've spent some time talking about product mix and product mix and fit and where that goes, and I'll let you get to some of that, but I know we think that we have the right approach here as we launch, and then to kind of work it over time with our partner to just put things into reality.
Yeah. So we'll jump into a discussion about what's the ideal partner, but just in terms of going to market in 24 different markets at the 30,000 foot level, all this experience in building the brand and the go-to-market strategy and product market fit. What's your biggest takeaway of just all the experience you've garnered in 24 different markets? What's the secret sauce on a 24 market rollout?
I think the secret sauce is to be in it with the partners, to really understand it and learn it and be shoulder to shoulder with the team that's on the ground. And I think it's one of the big values that Airo brings to the table for our partners outside of any of it is the senior team, the C-suite team, and the VP level team are all very active in these states. And you have to be, right? Even when a state looks like a layup because there's only 5 licenses and you're partnered with the guy that's got 2 out of the 5, you still need to approach it as one day this is going to be an open market. And so what do we do now to build market share and then aggressively protect that market share?
So you lean in, your team leans in, you're very, I guess in that sense, you're a little bit top heavy, but you've needed to build the C-suite and VP infrastructure to manage all these suites. So it is generally speaking a top heavy model in terms of management. And then your partner, like what is the ideal partner for you? What's nirvana when you find what you say, that's the right guy to work with, right team to work with?
A lot of times it's people that it's thinking practically through where the market's going to go, people that have the right connections in a market. And then on the operational side, I think it's scale and capacity, but also looking at their efficiencies in whether it's extraction or cultivation and their supply chain, and them being able to, whether they know we're looking at it or not, the reality is like we want to know that we're locking in early days with a partner that can sustain a position and a potentially a competitive edge over time through their efficiencies, whether it's the size and scale of their cultivation and their cost of production per pound, or their cost of extraction. And a lot of that comes with scale. And so we've been able to find really strong state by state partners that have a true focus on those states, that are agile, nimble, smart, and capable of handling wherever it goes in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
That's interesting because on the one hand, like, okay, so they're, your partners are, can support your scale. They also have their own scale that is an attractive feature for you. How do you think about that partner in terms of their core business? I mean, it's pretty easy when there's a co-packer that exists, has maybe cultivation, manufacturing, and does some logistics for you and has lots of brand partners, which is complicated in one sense because you're fighting for attention. But then there's the other type of partner that has some level of vertical integration. Maybe they're another brand, a competitive brand or a gummy brand, or, how do you differentiate in terms of what you're looking for? Are you actively looking for someone that's not competitive to you, like another brand, or does that actually, favor you in some markets? I mean, you're in 24, so you've probably done most. What's the experience been versus with working with pure co-packers versus, with other brands that quasi have support, distribution support and wholesale support into other dispensaries, but might be walking in with their brand and then, oh, by the way, I got Airo here behind me.
Mm-hmm. I think the co-packer model is great. I mean, the trade-off is you're getting something produced at usually a much lower price. But what you're fighting for, to your point, is attention and energy and focus. I think when we look at our partners, all of our partners actually make their own products and have their own brands. A lot of times, where Airo is positioned, so I mentioned before, we're a top 4 US brand. We're really the leading premium brand in the US, carrying a higher than average price delta over median pricing in the market. And I think part of that is to make sure we're kind of not right directly on top of our partner in terms of what their offering is. And typically it's justified because of the technology that we're bringing to market, right? We do have different technology than any of our partners. And so I think our partners actually view it as very complementary, and having their brand and our brand all be on the same truck, where they kind of fitting the good, better, best in terms of that category. I think it's certainly a good solution for them and the retailers that they're servicing.
Are you looking for, so that's interesting. So the majority of your partners also have brands, even if they're not, as prominent as yours. I would imagine there's some that you're very attractive because you're going to help pull their brands into the stores, and that's all fine and dandy, right? I mean, no harm, no foul on that. What are the value adds that those partners can bring to you? So you talked about infrastructure in terms of, obviously, they've got to be able to make the product. What are the other things that partners can bring to the table that makes Airo say, now that's really helpful for you? Is that sales and marketing? Is it actually packaging? Is it compliance? What are the things that, like, damn, that's helpful for us?
I think one of the big ones is relationships, being able to, and it's really on the sales side. So, we provide our own sales team in every state, because we feel like it would be, silly of us to just kind of ask you to go out and sell the product. We also want that level of control, to have somebody telling our message the way we want it to be told. But then additionally, like, it really, these in some cases, yes, we're happy to walk people through the door that we might already have a lot of relationships in that market. But there's always a local ground game that happens in each state, and having a partner and a sales team that has great relationships that have already been established, really brings us through the door, I think, a lot faster. And they're not necessarily in every case doing the selling for us, but they're happy to make an introduction to the buyer or the purchasing manager, or the CEO of the company or the GM, and get us in the door and at least get us a meeting. And that certainly helps a lot. And then it's just operational excellence. I mean, having the ability to, make sure they're highly compliant, keeping us and themselves out of harm's way in terms of regulatory is important, but also being able to just deliver. Right. I think, the category, just industry as a whole is evolving, and, not every, retailer is the same, and there's a lot to worry about at retail. And so if I know that, hey man, I must have missed that I need some more Airo inventory, I must have missed that I need some more Buckeye inventory, I'm going to put an order in today, hopeful that I get it by Thursday, because that's what the company promised. Having companies that can actually deliver that by Thursday, when that's what they said they were going to do, becomes really important for your reputation in the market. And so we like to see that from our partners as well.
When you think about your launch into a new market, I mean, obviously a lot has to do with the biomass, right? Is it outdoor grown, which you go to fresh frozen and do a live resin product or a rosin product? Is it just distillate? Is it, a greenhouse, what have you? There's all these factors that go in, and you've seen them all. And then you've obviously done, medical markets that have evolved into rec. Is there a playbook that you can kind of say, okay, this market's going to be distillate out of the gate, we'll get in, it's not our favorite thing, but we want to pivot to rosin as fast as we can? Or like, is there kind of an approach that you have on, like, been there, done that, this is how the market, we think we'd like to see it directionally head so that we can capitalize? So we're going to help lead the market there. We're going to lead with the pivot from distillate to rosin or things like that. Is that something that you kind of go through every time you go into a new market and say, all right, what's our longer term plan here versus just the launch strategy?
Yeah, we look at it that way. I mean, I think in newer markets, like on the East Coast, you're seeing things, it starts off in distillate, right? Because you just got to have biomass and efficiently extract that. I think what happens is, like, when you look at like resins and rosins, they're, in Jersey, they're on shelf, and they're on shelf from anywhere from $80 to $100 for, a half gram of ready vape resin oil or rosin oil. It's about $600 a pound of wet weight. So it's a very expensive product in the early days while we're trying to keep up with the number of doors that are opening. So there is that different dynamic in Jersey, for instance, where we went from 30 stores and, good scale out of the MSOs and a couple of small guys kind of popping in here and there, to now having 15, 20 guys that are all cranking out really great product. But the number of stores is outpacing that pretty dramatically right now. We're about 180 stores in Jersey. And so that's an example of, hey, get in, and now as we're getting in, find some of the right partners outside of just our current one, which is Ascend, to collaborate to bring things like rosins and resins to market. But in the beginning, it's having just biomass in general that can produce distillate. Most of our core portfolio is based on distillate products, and I think a lot of that was the ability to standardize the formulation in conjunction with that base cannabis oil on a state-by-state basis, so that if you buy an Airo SKU like a Black Mamba, that's the same product in Jersey as it is in Colorado, as it is in Washington, as it is in Maryland. And that was the idea for us out of the gate.
We're going to get to that CPG discussion in a second. So the last question I have on partners and partner selection and partner experience is around what have the harder lessons been relative to relationships that haven't worked out. Obviously, balance sheet and things of that nature might come in, but from your experience, generally speaking, when do problems occur in the relationship? What are the drivers between drivers behind the relationships that you've had that have not worked out?
You know, I think you do your best to pick as good as you can, and in most states, you know, California's always been it's been a long-standing challenge for Airo specifically, and in a lot of cases we've had really strong what looked like and seemed like really strong partners, and everybody was either hit with one curveball or another in that market. You know, we had groups that were extremely well financed that ended up becoming some of the larger players there, and you know, took them some time. They've kind of gone through some downturns, some pretty aggressive downturns. We've gone through some smaller groups that had great distribution that nobody's ever heard of, but they've had things like a robbery happen. I mean, you know, how do you stop that? You know, the business is going well, they get $2-3 million worth of inventory and equipment stolen from their facility, and you know, they're going to fight insurance for what, 2 years, right? So those guys have kind of closed doors, and we've seen stuff like that happen. So there's a handful of things that have happened over the years that have been kind of outside of not just our control but our partners' control. I think the ones that we see coming are, you know, where you have some misalignment between us and the partner around the supply chain, the capacity, focus, and just speed to market. You know, we've had some challenges where some partners are just very slow to adapt, and that might be because they're public. You know, we have some great public companies that we work with today, but we've had a couple that are just, you know, operationally they have to go through too many boxes to get to a place where we're trying to be cutting edge, and now we're just trying to catch up because what should have launched 6 months ago is now launching 12 months later, and you know, the market's already changed underneath our feet. And so we've had some situations like that as well, but it's been an interesting learning curve in whole.
I mean, it's a partnership. Unlike, I mean, you know, you got to be nimble, you got to be responsive, or you're going to get left behind. And your brand is, you know, the one that suffers in that. I mean, if you're late to the game. So let's talk about CPG and cannabis. Like, obviously, this has been a focus of yours from the start. Where are we on the continuum of what people think about as CPG? What is cannabis CPG? I mean, are we there yet in terms of consistency, or what are the consumers expecting relative to CPG at this stage?
I think so. I certainly think so in the premium space. I think consumers come to expect, especially with, you know, our national counterparts and groups, you know, the same consistency, quality, and you know, there's a level of trust that starts to go into these brands, especially given, you know, the lay of the land, not just with, you know, our industry as a whole, but also what's happening on the Delta 8, Delta 9 side and the hemp side. And so trust is becoming even more of a factor now than, you know, more so now than ever. I think having a brand and being a brand is really about executing against that brand promise that you're committing to with your customers. And you know, for us, our focus has been delivering on that.
So it would seem that one of the big challenges for you that you have varying degrees of involvement on, more when it's a problem, less when it's not, is the supply chain, because you don't control your own supply chain, right? And you're trying to be nimble and address and react to the market, but you're missing that leg of the stool. So how do you deal with supply chain? How active are you? Are there situations where your partner's not doing such a great job and you guys are on the phone looking for other options, maybe not changing partners, but finding supply on their behalf? How do you just react to changing market dynamics when you don't own your own supply chain?
So I think a lot of it just starts with, naturally, it's something we very much spend a lot of time kind of digging in on now ahead of these launches. In some cases, we know that everything is tight, but everybody's tight, right? The supply chain's tight, but everybody around us is tight, and this is what we have to work with today. You know, we know that there will be a world where that opens up. Now, in some cases, if you know, we have nationwide relationships, and at this point, I think, you know, typically when you look at like a region, right, there'll be a couple of guys that are in New York and New Jersey. There's a bunch of guys in Illinois and Missouri. And so there's a whole host of relationships that kind of spill out from existing markets into new ones. And, you know, wherever, again, kind of going back to the concept, Airo is just here to be as good of a partner as we can be. And so if you're my guy in that market and we got a problem and you need more supply, we're going to go out and do whatever we can and call on whoever we can call on to make sure you have that, even if it's a pinch. But we want to be able to deliver that, right? And again, our interests are aligned. We want to keep our brand on shelf. And so we do spend a lot of, I think now we spend a lot of time up front in vetting the supply chain and kind of where it's going and what it's going to look like, but also knowing that there's some comfort in, we have some third-party relationships that are able to also support the brand itself, because of existing partnerships that have, predated this one in prior states.
Yeah. So Rich, I've spoken to a couple of brands that put an awful lot of energy into the front end before they go into a market. They're looking at 5 or 6. They're doing product market fit, pricing analysis, supply chain analysis. And then they're like, no, I don't want to go into that market. I'm going over here. You're in 24 markets. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a market that has necessarily, where you've said, no, I'm not going there. Your version of scale is to be in as many states as you can. So to what degree does product market fit play in to your decision to move into a new market, and maybe less so, versus actually tactics on how to launch within that market and price and all that? Like, at what point does product market fit come into your kind of vernacular in terms of analysis of a market?
So I think when we look at, you look at all these states, one of the things we've learned is, I think in some cases being in early comes with its challenges, but also, being in early to me still has, it's like one of the equations we were talking about before, it's a net positive. There's less competition. You're able to entrench yourselves with the existing users, and that situation just ends up morphing. So in the beginning, when we launched our first 6, 7 markets, it was 2017, right? So there was a lot of states that we were just catching up to. And even through 2018, some of the new markets that were coming out in 2018 and 2017 were just keeping up. I think now when we look at some of our markets in terms of where our brand is actually positioned and the distance between us and the number 2 player or the number 3 player or the number 5 really is, we were there early. We were able to service the market, get the consumers and the kind of the hype within the market built before anybody else comes in. And you see that in markets like Jersey, where we're on any given month number 2 or number 3. Markets like Virginia, West Virginia, we're doing extremely well right now, way above kind of what we even projected, just because we're able to deliver a very superior experience in those spaces. And what we've also learned is, as we mature into adult use markets, we're able to keep that market share for a very long period of time, and it costs less to defend it down the road. And so, it's having the right support around that. I think, from a business decision standpoint, is our brand that portable, and does it have an ROI attached to it? And I think one of the things that's funny, when we go into new markets, we have these conversations with people, and they're like, well, what's the minimum? We don't have a minimum. If we're having a conversation about minimums, we're both doing the wrong thing. And I think that's just our approach has been, it's that agile, that nimble in terms of what it can do and how it can generate not just revenue for me, that's great, but also real value for our partners, that we can be everywhere early, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's got to be fascinating because you're operating in 24 different silos, right? I mean, basically, let's say hypothetically you launch in a market, things are doing good, and a big brand comes in, a competitor comes in, and they undercut you by 15%. They're trying to buy market share. They know they're late and they're going to buy market share, or any one of a number of scenarios that kind of force you to kind of react to what they're doing. And you've done that in 24 different states. I mean, what's that process like on a sales and marketing on a daily basis? You just must be inundated with data from all these different markets. Like, Rich, guess what happened in Ohio today, right? Or look who did this. I mean, how do you manage all that, right? The sales and marketing support must be off the charts.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate, and we have there's a great team here, and I'm a huge believer in my group's capabilities. So they've been it's been a blessing having intelligent people that are able to see it before it's happening and get ahead of it. And so just very blessed with a great sales and marketing organization.
Have you ever where do you sit on when it comes to sales and marketing, right? There's obviously in large buckets. There's culture, and there's product, right? And culture is obviously something that, you don't just invent. You don't, you have to, it has to be part of your DNA. And there's obviously product, which is much more flexible. And even within vapes, you got lots of different paths there. How do you, what is your approach to marketing Airo's culture, what you believe in, your beliefs, these types of things? How does that, is that the first thing that you do in a new market, where you introduce the brand to people on a kind of the cultural perspective of who we are and what we're all about, and then back channel with product? Or is it, hey, we've been doing this for a long time, we got a great product, and culture's not second, but in terms of how do you kind of, what's more important to the consumer, educating them about who you are or what you do?
I think we're a product centric brand, and I mentioned we have a great sales organization where we have a hell of an operations team as well, and product development team. And so I think one of the things some people here may have heard of Airo, maybe some haven't. We've been very quiet in terms of how we go out and just build, and it's a product centric strategy. So when we go into a state, as you saw the product, it has its own cartridge and its own device. We're not lying when we say we have the best performance in terms of a vape product. And so we've been able to, our initial strategies get it into the hands of not just the customer, but also the trade, right? And get the trade to kind of respect the quality of what's built and have our sales reps tell that story the right way. So we've very much are a product-centric strategy. I think now that the business itself is maturing, we have started to kind of talk and lean in on the, what is and who is Airo story, and that's where folks like Annie come into play.
Yeah. Okay. So has there been an evolution in the vape category that it'd be a demographically driven? I mean, are you starting to see clear demographics across markets, or is every market different from that perspective? What can you say about like who your customer is?
So we look at, again, as a premium brand, we look at it from a product that somebody tends to, there's a new user that wants a certain component of premium in their life, and that's their buying behavior, not just across cannabis, but across other products that they buy, whether it's their cell phone or the type of alcohol they might purchase. So we tend to carry a 28 plus is our average demographic in terms of age, and that range goes all the way up. We are pretty evenly split between male and female, and so we just know, we look at our demographic, and it's really about maturity. And I think it's also part of how we've marketed our product, and we haven't pushed on the youngest side of the coin in terms of where it should be, but where we want our consumers to be, and we want where we feel like the loyalty is going to come from.
Nice. So then back to kind of the concept of what you just talked about in terms of there's sales in a market and then there's marketing, right? And your marketing, I mean, they're decoupled in some sense, that they're different initiatives, but your marketing group needs to kind of tailor their product message to the characteristics of a specific market, specific state. Is that, I mean, having this, what are the benefits or what are the challenges that you face in this kind of, marketing has to kind of cover everything, but actually in some markets you need to drive sales through your marketing versus others that the product is kind of selling itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, the challenge is I think always is just bandwidth, because it feels like, as you go through 24 states, there's always something happening, and it's always happening quickly, and it had to be done yesterday. But I think the idea of tailoring messages, we have a solid enough team that we're able to work closely with each state sales force to then tailor and craft, whether it's certain dispensaries in certain states are smaller and maybe in New Jersey than they are in Illinois, right? And so we have more space to play with in terms of merchandising or in terms of storytelling, versus again, what we might have in a new market where, like, it's West Virginia. Yeah. We're constantly having this iterative process between sales and marketing on a state-by-state basis, and just keeping up with the speed at which we have to crank out, because not all those materials are even allowed to look the same, right? From a regulatory standpoint, everything, everybody tailor something, whether it's the THC warning logo or the colors or how much graphic is allowed to be on the front label. And so there's always a lot of tweaks, but we've really found a way on the back end to do that pretty rapidly on an internal scale.
So as if operating in 24 markets isn't enough with one core focus of vapes, you have now launched gummies. What was the driver behind that? Is this land and expand kind of strategy where you get in, you establish yourself in vapes and now want to add products, or what were the reasons behind, and why gummies, right? Obviously we know gummies are a huge seller, but there's a lot of competition out there. So what was the thinking behind the move into gummies as it relates to the strategic direction of the company?
So I think gummies, for us is kind of a step into, a new category, and a category we also thought we could bring a lot of innovation to. We have done some interesting stuff around the encapsulation as it relates to the formula of our product, as well as the cannabinoids inside that encapsulation, to bring something different to market that I think was a technology that we've been kind of learning, how far it can stretch. We certainly knew it can work and be applicable in a gummy format, and so we decided to bring that product to market. And I think, like anything else, it's go in and get the learning. So even when you launch in these markets, we have the same standard playbook, but over time these strategies end up evolving. And so whether that's our SKU portfolio, understanding also, for us it's been a great learning curve, because now we're understanding too, the resilience of our partner, where they are, how what's their ability to manufacture, not just for one brand but multiple brands. And I think we've done that now in 4 markets. So it's still new, it's still a learning curve, but each launch, like one of the things we've learned is what is the right playbook for launching a new product outside of vape, right? Because the playbook is pretty tried and true for us over there. But we've learned, having the right sampling program, having the right launch party has been pretty effective for us. Getting in front of and kind of collaborating in terms of sales strategy between our current user base and what we want to drive trial, right? So buy an Airo cartridge, get a pack of gummies for $1. I think all those tools are still being worked out, but I'm glad we're doing it in a kind of a smaller group of states, but we're learning pretty rapidly as we go from one to another. And so I think that for us is the evolution of where Airo wants to be, is a leader in the premium segment of really the convenience categories. And so whether that's just on the vapes, obviously vape side, ingestion side, but also we believe there's a play inside of combustion as well.
Interesting on the convenience focus. So like you talked about in the beginning, your core philosophy is product driven. It is like your innovation is near and dear to your heart, and you've achieved that in vapes, and you're applying that same innovation approach to gummies. How does a gummy, I know there's lots of people using multiple different cannabinoids in the gummy, but what is innovation in the gummy? Why did you determine that the gummy space was ripe for you to enter based on your ability to innovate there? What were the kind of the areas that you say, this is what we want to do differently?
Yeah, so I think one area of innovation for Airo, which is, which is something we talk about a little bit less, but is flavor. We've really been a big pioneer in the flavor side of certainly the vape segment, but also I think some of what we've done with the flavor houses in terms of having naturally extracted fruits and terpenes coming off in a natural process has given us a leg up. And so we felt that there's things, the key things that you would look at is flavor, so taste, chew, and then onset and offset. We very much think about fast acting, long lasting was really the goal, and we've been able to do that through kind of a whole host of ways. I think some are we'd probably keep a little closer to the chest here, but it's been a learning process for us. But I think checking those boxes and feeling good about what we're able to bring to market gave me personally the comfort to say, yeah, okay, I can understand why we're going into this category. And then it's the evolution of that, right? And so how do you start to now introduce, In the beginning, I think when any brand launches, you want to keep the SKU set very tight. And so our first core group of SKUs are fast acting, long lasting, and they tend to tie very closely. So it's the same, they taste slightly different, but it's more or less the same taste profiles as what you can find in our vape, right? So if you're a heavy Airo user and you like, Midnight Moon, well, we have a Midnight Moon edible. And with the exception of one's a vape and one's an actual product that you chew on, they do taste the same. And so that was a process and just getting that aligned. But now it's also looking at the category as a whole and saying, okay, now that we're in, what do we start to introduce behind this to kind of compete against the rest of the market, whether it's, a cannabis, and we do have cannabinoids in half of our SKUs. When we tend to launch it, we'll have half that are THC and rosin or resin, and then half that have other cannabinoids in them already to give some functional benefit. But now it's, how do we start to introduce some of the stuff that we're sitting on in the lab into the SKU portfolio the right way that allow us to kind of further break out in terms of effects and onset and, again, offset.
Nice. We've got a few more minutes here. One of the questions that a lot of people like to talk about or understand is partnering with MSOs versus single state operators, pros and cons. Generally speaking, you've partnered with a lot of MSOs. What is the difference between partnering with an MSO and and just a traditional single state operator?
Well, I think the big difference is speed. So what, some of the MSOs that we've worked with in the past, we've had great relationships and still keep a great relationship at retail with any of them. I think operationally there was just some misalignment around being able to move quickly, and it's been an evolution even for our partners. I know that we have groups like the Cannabis and Ascend, who we work very closely with across multiple markets, and that was a conscious decision. We didn't look at it as this is a sweeping deal, let's get as many markets as we can. We looked at it as, is this independently a good fit for that state, right? And so we've been able to look at them and say, okay, yes, it makes sense because we have one state underneath us and we're able to very quickly roll it out into multiple markets. And here are the markets that we think it makes the most sense for us and our brand to be partnered up. But I think part of that has been even just the process in terms of the C-suite team. We have folks like David Gockham, who's been an awesome liaison of the third-party brands over at Ascend. They've been able to, over the years, just evolve and quickly and rapidly pretty much scale. And they're almost operating at the speed of some of our better independent operators. And it's an interesting dialogue. And we have the same thing happening with Volley over at the Cannabis. It's, these folks and these operational teams are really moving quickly. And I think part of that comes with, building a level of confidence in the Airo SKUs. And I know, there was a point in time where anytime you'd go to them and say, hey, I need to launch a new SKU, well, there was pages and pages of data that you needed to provide to support that. But I think over time, as they begin to build a level of trust, and any of our partners build a level of trust with Airo and our decision making and kind of why and what makes the most sense, once we establish that, there's a real ability to lean in on both sides. And that's been one of the pros here of being able to say, okay, we see what's coming, and now there's a belief that we're able to do this not just in one state but 4 states pretty quickly. Our single state operators have been, great, and again, it all goes back to the agility, right? And so I think for us, it's very much about how fast can we bring some of these things to market, because sometimes something's happening in a market that we just didn't forecast. It's new, and so you don't have the data, right? But it's what you're hearing on the ground, and that's kind of back to having a sales team, having a ground game. It's important to kind of understand the lay of the land pretty quickly as these things evolve.
It sounds like you've had to exercise a little bit more patience with the MSOs in terms of like the process from the very beginning. But like many industries, when you find a big partner that can help you scale, you invest that time and energy into the relationship, and all of a sudden it hits a flashpoint, right? And your flashpoint is like, okay, we struggled through the launch of this product in this market, but now it's taking off. I don't have to struggle in the other 3 or 4 markets that Ascend or the Cannabis is in, because now we've ironed out the kinks. So it sounds like it's been the investment that a little frustrating on the front end, but on the back end now it's like more seamless. Would that be fair?
That's fair, very fair.
Do you have do you work very closely with their wholesale teams when they have brands in markets to really focus on wholesale, or is this more like Florida where they're vertically integrated? It's all their products on all their shelves.
So in some, I mean, they wholesale everywhere. So we work closely, like in all the markets that we span with both companies. There is a wholesale component, albeit in states like Virginia, it was very small, right? Because there's 21 stores and they're controlled by 5 licenses. And I believe now there's the 5th one, which is Air.
Yeah.
2 out of the 4 for a little bit before the transaction were owned by the cannabis, G Leaf and Columbia Care. And so even in those markets, they have wholesale. Then we work closely with them on the retail side to bring that product as widely distributed as possible.
Nice, nice. Last question, Rich. You've been awesome. This has been fantastic. But give us 2025. What are you hoping for? What is your dream in 2025 for Airo or the industry? What's coming?
Well, I think everybody's hopeful that rescheduling is going to happen post-election. It would be interesting to see some version of safe banking slip in, but I think every time anybody in the side of the industry thought they had a crystal ball, you had to reshake it again after the due date came and gone. But I think for us specifically here at Airo, we have a lot of very exciting stuff in our pipeline that we're really bullish on. So it's very hopeful that rollout goes smoothly between us and our partners. It's really about continuing to work the system, which is just an every year goal, is continue to drive success in the markets that we're doing extremely well, but also look at the ones that we're not and start to ask the tough questions and figure out how to fix those and address those as quickly as possible. And then also start to bring, now this year was a new topic with gummies, but start to bring that more aggressively throughout the US, given that we're tightening up the playbook pretty rapidly here. So, really excited for some of the milestones ahead that we need to execute on in 2025.
Well, we're looking forward to tracking amazing progress to date. Kudos to you. You've achieved something that nobody else has achieved. So well done. We'll be looking forward to tracking Airo's process from here going forward. Rich, thanks so much for coming on board here at DeepRoots. We really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to continuing the dialogue. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great stuff. All right. Thanks, everyone.